Welcome to the program. I'm Andrew Wilkow. Normally in the opening segment, the monologue, I will have spent so much time researching and editing and writing to bring you something that's, yes, scripted, but it's my words. In this episode, we're going to be dealing a lot with Cuba, and for the first time, I'm going totally unscripted. So here we go. Try to imagine being raised in a society where you have no freedom of speech, you have no freedom of thought, you have no right to acquire property. And no matter how repressive or oppressive the government is, through technology, you find out that just 90 miles away is a society called the United States of America. Maybe you heard about cousins or aunts and uncles who back in the day fled Cuba and went to Miami, let's say. And you hear about the freedoms of the people of the United States. It would probably shock you to know that there's a political party here in the United States that thinks, oh, no. This freedom is actually oppressive. True freedom comes in the form of Marxism, socialism, communism. We have those people. They're called the Democratic Socialists of America, and they seem to be pulling Biden's strings. Try to imagine having a president of the United States who can't even come out and condemn communism. I want you to listen to this. This is pretty shocking. Jen Psaki is the White House press spokesperson. See, I'm unscripted. She carries the message of President Biden. Listen to what she had to say about the protests in the streets of Cuba.
Do you think that people are leaving Cuba because they don't like communism?
I think we've been pretty clear that we think people are leaving Cuba, or not leaving Cuba, or protesting in the streets as well, because they are opposed to the oppression, to the mismanagement of the government in the country.
Mismanagement? They're in the streets because of mismanagement? Not 62 years of centralized authority, a socialist Marxist government? It's just a little bit of mismanagement? Is this what Biden and the Democrats think? Yeah, I'm getting a little emotional here. Because I can't believe this is what they can't possibly believe that, right? Government mismanagement. Now I want you to listen to the Secretary of Homeland Security, who's actually of Cuban descent. All of a sudden, after years and waves of migrants coming from Central America who have just crossed our borders, no problem. This is what the Secretary of Homeland Security has to say.
Allow me to be clear. If you take to the sea, you will not come to the United States. The time is never right to attempt migration by sea. To those who risk their lives doing so, this risk is not worth taking. Again, I repeat, do not risk your life attempting to enter the United States illegally. You will not come to the United States.
You want to talk about people, poverty and violence? You want to talk about people fleeing state-run terrorism? That's the people of Cuba. Now, look, to be consistent, we can't take every Cuban into the United States, and we certainly can't send our military in to topple the government. But all of a sudden, the message of the Democrats has changed. Now, what is that? What is the difference? Well, in their estimation, all of the people coming from Central America are likely Democrat voters. But what makes the Cubans so different? Why are they always carved out of the Latino vote? Well, it's pretty basic. They know that Cubans have a history of voting Republican. And when Democrats say that the American flag is the symbol of oppression, you tell me why those Latinos are flying our flag. All right, since we're doing this episode almost entirely unscripted, I don't think I need a scripted intro to bring on Glenn Beck. Thank you for...
How are you?
Good. Thank you for coming on here and doing this, because this is a new thing for me. I wanted to start with Cuba. Mm-hmm. And you and I talked about this before, in between your radio and other stuff that you were doing.
I think about 5 o'clock this morning.
Exactly. You started with the chalkboard back in 2008. The first time you and I ever did a radio appearance together. You jumped on my radio program in 2004 at the Republican convention in New York City when I was just a local host on a three-letter, WGY, that's right.
Yeah.
Our industry has been beaten up by the left for talking about Marxism in this country. They think we're just making up some boogeyman. They think we're just out of our minds. We're trying to scare people.
We were racist. When I said it in 2008, I was called a racist for calling the president a Marxist. How? What? Now they're proudly coming out and saying, which is exactly in 2010, exactly what I said. I said, these people they can't wait to tell you who they are and what they want to do. They can't wait, and the masks will come off. And that's when we're in trouble. And the masks have been coming off now for the last few years.
But now you see the Democrats can't even really condemn the government of Cuba. They have been given
they couldn't not only condemn, they couldn't condemn communism. It's not like, oh, I got to condemn Cuba. Okay. They couldn't say that it was even communism that people were up in arms about. They won't condemn communism? Who is running this country?
Well, what's amazing is Jen Psaki went out and said, well, this is about mismanagement in the vaccine. And then you have to think to yourself, so 62 years of Marxism, 62 years of oppression, no freedom of speech, no freedom of religion, no freedom to assemble, no freedom of the press, no freedom at all. And then the promises of the revolutionary government failed at every turn, right? They're a literate population, but they're told what to read. They're told that we have the greatest doctors on earth, but the average person can't access a hospital. Right. And we're supposed to believe that these people are in the streets because of some mismanagement. Well, the entire thing is mismanaged, and it has been since Castro took over.
Right.
And people like you and me using our radio platforms, television platforms, social media platforms, we have been saying this is what it is, and it's likely to come here, and we've been written off as crazy. And just as you said, the Democrats can't even, and the media's not going to stick a mic flag in their face and go, excuse me, can you condemn socialism? Can you condemn Marxism? They're trying to find the perfect, scripted, focus group tested line to walk to say, well, we believe in freedom, we stand with the Cuban people, but we're going to leave it there.
It's because the people who are actually now running the country, and I don't mean Joe Biden, the people who are actually running, they are hardcore socialist Marxists. They don't believe in America. They don't believe that she's a good country. They believe the things that they are saying, and they are destroying us from the inside. I mean, it's interesting to watch the fight that is happening in the school. I mean, Castro was very clear. The first thing he did after he killed a bunch of people was to make sure that the revolution was taught in schools. They took over the schools. You cannot have a revolution. Yeah, you can't have a revolution without the media, without the army, without the schools. The schools are what kept Cuba for so long. Now it's interesting to watch how what they are teaching in our schools. They are tearing apart our families. They are tearing apart our ideals, the structure. They're turning our children against each other. It's remarkable. Those are now the people that are actually running the country.
You know, it's funny, when you first started the original version of the Blaze and the people that were assembled, you know, I remember writing monologues for my show then and thinking, like, people are going to think we're crazy. I would, if we talked about people like John Dewey and all of these figures, you know, the devil's best trick was making you think he didn't exist. But this programming has been trying to shed a light on this, only to be laughed off by the mainstream media and then some of the more idiotic programs like The View. But when we look at you know, it's funny how people who look at conservatives, people that hold this stuff near and dear, and their first attempt is to write you off as not intellectual. You don't like fancy book learning, right? And you don't like science, you don't like science. But I think the talk radio audience and, of course, this audience are as well read, or else this stuff wouldn't work.
No,
you and me would be wasting our time talking about this stuff.
The talk radio audience is more well read than the average person and more well read than the average liberal, for sure. I just saw a report that came out about 6 months ago on that. We are up to speed on things, and you know this. The first time you did talk radio, I'm sure you felt the same way. I did 20 years of music radio. You don't have to be a,
I know that.
an intellectual giant. The first, about 3 months into talk radio, I went home and I said to my wife, I don't know if I can do it. This audience is brutal. If you get one thing wrong, they're on you. And it's 1 against a million. You know what I mean? All these people. You know somebody knows more about what you're talking about than you do. But the overall arc of it, of the knowledge that is required to do our job, and honestly, that the people who listen to talk radio have stored, is far greater than those who are just your average American. And this is what's so frustrating, is we can show you the facts. We can show you, and this is the thing.
And the history.
Yeah, this is the thing that really shocked me at Fox. I really thought if I could make the case, somebody in a newsroom would go, you know, I hate that guy, and I think he's a clown. But is that true? There's got to be something to it. No. They either are intellectually dead inside, or, as we're seeing now, they're part of it. They're part of it. They don't have a problem with Marxism. They don't have a problem. They were raised.
But do they know what it is, though? Because I'll give you an example. And there's a lot of doublethink. I've been doing a lot on doublethink lately. For example, you have people that say things that are just on the surface ridiculous. The American flag is the symbol of white nationalism and oppression, right? Mm-hmm. And that is not challenged in the media. Mm-hmm. It is said across the board, Democrats, and they'll start saying, well, in the suburbs, people put up American flags to say, you're not welcome here if you're non-white. Then you watch a protest in Havana, and what symbol are those Latinos, people of color,
today.
Right?
Look at Hong Kong. Hong Kong. They were singing our national anthem in the streets of Hong Kong while holding our flag. We can't get our sports figures to do that.
No.
They know. See, what's happening here is we are focused on little teeny things that have happened in the past, not the overarching story of America. America is not about slavery. You could make that case maybe in the first 100 years before we abolished it, but after we abolished it, we're the only group of people, white people, that killed other white people to free a people of another color. We're the only ones in history. New England, if it were a country, would have been the first country to abolish slavery, I think by 40 years. They were 40 years ahead. First group of people in the world, 40 years ahead of Britain. We're looking at these things and we're picking apart and we're only concentrating on the mistakes. Well, people make mistakes all the time, but that's not who they are. They are more than just a collection of their mistakes, especially if they pick themselves up and start to do good things. Well, this country has done a lot of good things, and we have freed a lot of people. And our Constitution and Bill of Rights, countries that don't have those rights, they look to us and go, what would it be like to live there? We're picking it apart. Far away, they know exactly who we are. Not who we've allowed ourselves to become from time to time, but who we are, what we stand for. I don't worship the flag. I don't like to see it burned or trampled, but it's not a sacred cloth. What makes that special is what it represents, and that's what they see, what it represents. We can't even see that anymore.
You know what's funny? If we could go to Cuba and freely speak, not that we can, and we said, we have an idea for you guys. There's 16 provinces in Cuba, okay, including the capital. If all 16 provinces could have, let's say, an election to elect delegates, and those delegates would travel to a convention where, using a 2/3 majority, they would outline a new federal government. They would establish a house, a common house that would be directly elected. They would have an upper house that may be appointed by the provincial government. There'd be an executive branch with limited powers and a judicial branch to settle a handful of controversies between individuals and the provinces themselves. They then could go back and establish a governorship, a state assembly, a state senate, a state judicial branch, and crazy, elect electors who would then, after a popular vote, pick the new president of Cuba. The academics and the left that trash everything I just laid out, I guarantee you those people who are risking their lives would give anything for one opportunity to have the government I just described to you.
Yeah, anything. It's amazing to me that the whole world is recognizing freedom, and the elites on top are going the opposite direction. Notice that the people of Earth, not America, of Earth, are saying, I don't trust my government. I don't like my government. They're telling me who I have to be. I can't fly the Swedish flag, or I'm a racist. They're telling me what to do and how to live. And meanwhile, they're screwing up their own budgets. They're screwing up the wars. They're screwing up with the banking system. And they're telling me what to do? No, I don't want that. I don't want this global thing. And as the people are rising up saying, freedom is the answer. Transparency is the answer. Give us the power because we're now connected. So give us the power. That's the answer. Every single major government, along with big business, going the opposite direction. It's fascinating to me. Fascinating.
And we're the right wing, right?
Right.
They keep telling us we're this monstrous right wing. We're talking about freedom. We're talking about liberty, the freedom of speech, all of these things we supposedly hold dear, but we're some evil, awful.
See, I think if we could get to a point to where we are not talking about policies, but talking about principles, just tell me, are you willing to stand up for the Bill of Rights? And which of those rights are you not willing to stand up for? And put them on the record. Put them on the record. I want to know, freedom of speech, yes or no? Freedom of religion, yes or no? Freedom to ask and demand that your government answers to you, yes or no? The right to bear arms, okay, we might have some people there. You give me 8 or 9 out of the top 10, and I'm with you, brother. Look at every problem we have right now is because the Bill of Rights no longer means anything to those in Washington. They're spying on us, they're surveilling us, they're putting us in solitary confinement for 6 months without a trial for January 6th. Look at all of the things that are being violated right now. States' rights, all of them, all of them. All we have to do is stop talking about blue and red, stop talking about Donald Trump or even Joe Biden, and start talking about the principles, because that's what we agree on. We should. And if we don't, then we can't live together anymore. If you don't believe in the Bill of Rights, I'm sorry. I'm not seceding because my country believes in that. Those are my documents, okay? Not yours. So I'm not seceding. You should.
You know, what's funny is that we're doing this episode unscripted. There's a couple of topics here. We're running out of time. The two of us just went on this without anything.
Sorry.
But I do want to get you on the racist suburbs.
The racist suburbs.
You know, I looked back on an episode of my show on The Blaze from 2014 where I was talking about it. Now, all of a sudden, some of the mainstream voices are talking about it. I don't think many people that voted for Biden in the suburbs understand the attack they are under right now. That they picked up and left the cities, not because minorities were moving in. They wanted their tax dollars to go further. They wanted what most people want, which is a little bit of elbow room and some peace and quiet, and maybe, you know.
But this is universal. You talk to anybody in the NFL. They're all Democrats when they come on. I don't care what color you are. The minute they get a paycheck, they're Republicans.
Yeah.
Okay? We all want the same thing. We all want to give. We all want to help. We want to be a part of our community. Just don't rape me. Just don't take my money and piss it away. You know, I work hard for my money.
Which is the city governments, by and large.
City governments. And the federal government.
So the fascinating thing is, and I can bring everything back to Cuba right now. People get fed up with progressive leadership in the cities, and anyone who can get out will get out. White flight, black flight, there's all sorts of flights, right? They say, I'm not going to let you tax me for this low quality
Correct.
of life. They say, you're an evil, awful racist if you pick up and leave. This is about the greater good. And then people go out to the suburbs, and now the Democrats said, oh, no, you're not getting out of here so easily. We're bringing this economically diverse, multifamily dwelling. We're getting rid of these suburban plots. You're going to give in to government-run transportation. We're going to densify your cities, your towns, whether you like it or not. I'm old enough to remember when urban sprawl was the thing. They were fighting the suburbs.
yeah.
Don't expand the suburbs. It's getting too dense out there. Now they're saying, we got a better idea. First we told you couldn't dig the hole. Now we're telling you have to dig the hole.
It is the good thing about all this is I think people are waking up. I mean, both Republicans and Democrats and independents, because they went after our children. When you go into the schools, now you're screwing with
Critical
like
race
children.
theory.
Yeah.
Best advertisement for school choice ever.
Ever.
I don't think, look, I don't expect that the end to run up and grab me and go, Andrew Wilkow, I love you. I was a Democrat, a progressive, this and that thing. You changed my mind. It has happened. It's happened to you. It's happened to all of us. But I think sometimes it's got to get so absurd. Even though you want to stand there and go, I've been saying this all this time, but how much more absurd can it get?
Right.
I don't know, but I think tepid people, that's the word I've been using, tepid people are going, wait a second. You know, I like diversity and I like fairness and I like opportunity. I don't want this indoctrination stuff.
The problem is going to be tech. The problem is going to be tech. Tech is only smarter, I mean, with machine learning and real.
I remember when you brought the guys in, when you had the studio in New York City. I was there.
You remember that? Yeah.
I do remember that.
Yeah. And you remember what? Well,
and you were a little freaked out by those guys too, weren't you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It was, what was his name? Schmidt that said, I brought something up that wasn't in that book that he was promoting. And I said, you know, you said a few years ago that our kids right now, by 2025 are going to have to change their name because there's going to be so much collected on them that they won't be able to handle the burden of what's known about them. He said, oh, I don't know if I really meant it that way. And I'm like, well, what way did you? Because I've read it and I've watched the interview with you. You know, they were slippery on a lot of stuff back then, and we were right. I don't think our founders, this is the only thing that I think our founders didn't see coming, and that is corporations that would be much more powerful than nation states.
All right, last thing. I remember when you put out Arguing with Idiots. And I look at this CRT thing, and they keep saying if we don't do this, we're not teaching the real history, right? We're not going to teach slavery or Jim Crow and all that stuff as if we haven't been doing that, right? I have never met a conservative. I've heard you say it. Let's teach the real history. Right? Let's teach the real history.
Oh,
all the scars, all the sins,
all of it.
You know, and let's do our best to make the future better. They're saying no. We have to replace the history. We have to transform the history. We have to politicize the history.
Correct.
And I would argue this. I'll bet you that if CRT becomes the curriculum, you aren't going to hear that Woodrow Wilson segregated the federal workforce.
Oh, no.
FDR is not going to be the
now.
internment guy. The Democrats never filibustered 1964. Kamala Harris loves to talk about Frederick Douglass. Does she know what party he was in? That the Democrats didn't seat black delegates until the 1930s. CRT is not bringing a new level of consciousness about the sins of our nation.
No.
It is wiping the slate clean so a group of elites can decide what our kids think about this country.
Marx says you can't, what is it? There is no future with a past or something, but basically he was saying you must wipe out history. Mao did the same thing with the Cultural Revolution. You have to wipe all of that out. You have to break up families, break up traditions. Michelle Obama said it.
Transform
Barack
history.
knows.
To bring it back to Cuba, do they teach anything before the revolution? Because you could look at any picture of Havana on a Friday night in 1957, and it looks like a gorgeous, gorgeous place. It looks like Las Vegas. You could look at Havana 10 years later, and it still looks the same.
Looks exactly the same. We have to keep this story alive. The minute talk radio goes silent, the minute that conservatives stop talking about Cuba, that story will be over. We have to be online, SOS Cuba. We have to be sharing these stories because it's the only way their voices are going to be heard and the only way that anything might be done. The federal government's not going to do it, and neither is the media.
Here's something crazy on this, and I don't know if I'm the first. I threw a marker down the other day. I said no invasion of Cuba. And I got a fear here, because after Donald Trump said, let's end the endless wars, it's sort of, the Democrats couldn't say, yeah, we agree with that. All of a sudden, Bernie Sanders wasn't for pulling the troops out of Afghanistan, right? Why do I feel like if conservatives say, no more you broke it, you bought it, no more nation building, we know there would be an insurgency. If the military, and it's so tempting, right? We know our military could go in there and just squash their military like a bug. But that would mean we got to start supplying power, and we got to start supplying water, and we got to start supplying food and health care, and there will be an insurgency, and Russia and China will be funding it, if not the Venezuelans. It would be, a nightmare
The
to go in.
Venezuelans and probably the Russians are already on the ground.
Probably.
I don't know about you. I'm done with nation building. I'm done with all of that. Sorry.
If conservatives say that, though, Democrats,
I know. They seem to do the opposite.
It's a humanitarian mission, right? The Navy's a global force for good now.
That's exactly what they would say, too. Exactly what they would say.
Isn't that frightening? Because again, they say, we in talk radio, we in this media sphere, we here at BlazeTV, we're stirring up the crazies, even though we're saying, hold on a second here. Let's not go to war over this, right?
Stirring up the crazies. It is absolutely amazing that that's what they say. I mean, you know, we've known each other forever. You've been saying the same thing. I've been saying the same thing. Stirring up the crazies. The worst thing that has happened to the conservative movement in the last 20 years, the worst thing, January 6th.
I agree.
January 6th.
None of us defended it, though. We're all told.
None of us. I don't know anybody who defended it. You could look at that and go, in retrospect, I can see how that happened, blah, 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 but no one is defending it. I was outraged when that happened. I was warning of it in the morning, saying, whatever happens, don't do this. Well, they did.
And it started, I'll tell you this, we're going to run out of time here. Maybe we should put a to be continued on this. We'll pick up, we'll start at January 6th next time. I remember as I was getting off the air, it was happening. And I started to say, this is bad. Sean Hannity's coming up next. I'm sure he'll pick it up. I'm like, this is bad. And my top of the hour, this is bad. Don't do this. Please don't do this. Okay, I'm out of time. And then it was top of the hour news. Hannity came right on and said, this is bad.
It's very bad. It was very, very bad. And, you know, all you need is a Reichstag fire. And you don't know who really did what. And you can change the whole world. And they're itching for it. They've been itching for that fight for a very long time. We must be so clearly the opposite.
All right, we're going to stop here and create a little cliffhanger. So the next time I'm back in town, if your schedule is free, let's start January 6th.
Done.
All right. All right, listen, with all of the talk surrounding Cuba, and we've been talking about it a lot, I wanted to bring in somebody who can really tell some stories about the suffering of the Cuban people. Mike Gonzalez is a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy, and he joins us now. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew. Very happy to be here with you.
Just real quick, you were on my radio show and you talked about your family's history. Can you just give us a quick story?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we left when I was 12. It's about 50 years ago, exactly 50 years ago. And it was very difficult to leave already back then. My dad died and they let us go a few months after. We went to Spain. You know, I have memories of how hard it was under the communist regime in the 60s. We, had to be warned constantly that I couldn't repeat outside of the house the things I heard inside the house because they were putting people in prison. I myself, at the age of 11, was interrogated for about 2 hours because some neighborhood communists thought that I was committing sabotage. When I look at my son, who's 12, the idea that somebody could interrogate him for close to 2 hours is just it is unbelievable what they have lived under for 62 years. And to think we have Black Lives Matter here siding with the communist brutal regime or the Democratic Socialists of America, it's unspeakable.
But before we talk about the Democrats and their inability to actually condemn socialism and Marxism, just for a little history, after the revolution, did they say, well, we're going to start interrogating anyone who might have wrongthink, or did they say we're not going to let you have freedom of speech? Because the funny thing is, it seems like this stuff, and I could be wrong, I wasn't there. What were the promises? Because we always hear that the communists come with promises of free health care and free education and an apartment or a home for every family. They make all of these promises to get people to support their revolution, to make it popular. What were the promises of the communist revolutionaries and what did they actually deliver?
This video online of Fidel Castro speaking in English saying that he's not a communist in 1959. People can find it. Don't take my word for it. Google it. Do your own Googling. Find it yourself. The video is about a minute long. He said this to the Cuban people. He said that he hated communists. Many people were for him at the beginning, including my parents. The dictator Fulgencio Batista was not good, but he put my dad in prison. My grandfather was an anti-Batista activist, but nothing like what came later. What came later, it's the old difference between authoritarianism and totalitarianism. Authoritarian regimes are very bad. They're not liberal democracies like we are. But totalitarian systems seek to control the totality of your activities. There's even thought crime or dream crime. This is why they hate religion. They hate all aspects of our lives. Authoritarian governments tend to leave you alone to go to mass or synagogue or practice whatever religion you want to practice. Totalitarian systems is state terror. They involve, as you were seeing in Cuba since the demonstrations, we're sadly seeing video footage online of people getting beat up, men and women being dragged out of their houses, people getting shot. It's very dire what's going on now today at this hour in Cuba.
You know what's amazing is outside of the American Revolution, I can't think of another revolution where the people got more freedom, right? They think of revolution is upending the current regime, upending the status quo, getting rid of the tyrannical government. Then they get something worse.
Right. The American Revolution is the exception because the American Revolution was the founding fathers were trying to reassert their freedoms, the freedoms that the Brits had begun to change in the 1760s, and as the mother country tried to regain control of the colonies. And at first, the colonists actually tried to reason with England. They sent Franklin to London, and they said, "No, we want our rights as Englishmen." And only when Britain did not relent did the founding fathers launch a revolution to reassert their right to self-determination. Uh, every other revolution, you're absolutely right, from the French to the Cuban to the Russian one, has ended up in tears.
Let's talk about the Democrats' response here. I've played it over and over again. Jen Psaki said this is about mismanagement. The Democrats have said things like, well, we stand with the Cuban people, but they really haven't gone any further than that. There's been minor talk of people should have political freedom, but none of the Democrats have had the courage to criticize the system of government. They keep saying it's the embargo, they keep saying mismanagement, something about COVID, or is it 62 years of Marxism?
Yeah, and I think that the reason for that, obviously, is that they're deathly afraid of their left flank. They're deathly afraid of the squad, the left. And we know what the squad thinks because the Democratic Socialists of America and the Democratic Socialists had a statement siding with the brutal Castro regime. The Black Lives Matter overnight had a statement, strong statement, supporting the communist regime. This is why, look, my next book is on Black Lives Matter. It can already be pre-ordered on Amazon, and it's called BLM: The Making of a New Marxist Revolution. They're siding with the Marxists in Havana who are shooting and beating up people because BLM is Marxist itself. So Biden, who's not a communist, who's not a socialist, why does he take 24 hours to come out with it? It's like they're paralyzed in the White House. They had a pathetic tweet, was the official government reaction for 24 hours. By a minor functionary at the State Department. And then when we finally get the statement at noon on Monday, it is completely tepid. And as you said, it fails to mention the communist Marxist nature of the regime.
Why is the headline out of Cuba not Latinos reject socialism? You know, one of the amazing things is, and we've seen Democrats say it without any pushback, that if you live in the suburbs and you put up the American flag, that's a symbol of white nationalism. It says that people of color are not welcome. Well, you know what I'm seeing in the streets of Cuba? I'm seeing Latinos, people of color, waving American flags. If the American flag was such a symbol of oppression and white nationalism, why would they be waving it as they ask for their freedom?
The reason you see in the streets of Cuba, people of all colors, black, white, and in between, waving the American flag, is that the people who love freedom around the world and inside America understand that the American flag represents freedom. The people who don't like freedom inside the United States or outside the United States of any race, there's no Latino race, will identify the American flag with freedom. That is something, it's very simple, it's axiomatic.
You know, it's also amazing. Look, we can't have everybody come here from Cuba, right? I am consistent that immigration has to be a lawful system. But it's amazing. Since Obama, there's been no effort to stop the mass migration up through Mexico from Central America. And I think the Democrats have thought to themselves, these are likely Democrat voters. So we're not going to stop them from coming in. We're going to talk about fleeing poverty and violence. Well, I think we know the history of Americans of Cuban descent. They tend to be very conservative, and they tend to vote Republican. The Democrats don't like that. But look at these people on the streets, many of whom have disappeared already. They can no longer live safely in their country. Alejandro Mayorkas, who's also of Cuban descent, the Secretary of Homeland Security said, don't come. Don't get on boats. Don't come here. All of a sudden, they want sanity at our ports of entry. They want to talk about sovereignty, how we can't absorb all these people. When they look at people who are waving the American flag, who are likely to become conservative voters, now all of a sudden they say, don't come.
Yeah, I think the dichotomy is striking. I think Mayorka's biggest mistake is he's addressing himself to the Cuban people. He has to address himself to the government and say to the government, don't you even think of banishing your protesters, of banishing the disaffected, as Castro did in 1980 and again in 1994. Letting off pressure by telling the people who are demanding their freedoms, if you want freedom so much, take off of the United States at high seas. Mayorkas should have addressed himself to the puppet president of Cuba, Diaz-Canel, Miguel Diaz-Canel, and to the real power behind him, the Castro family, and said, don't even try to think of doing this again. There will be a very heavy, high price to pay. You have to listen to your own people. If they're demanding that you leave, maybe you have some thinking to do, but do not export your problems. Do not immigrate your way out of this.
You know, I can't imagine when I look at these people in the streets. I already love our country. And I love our Constitution, and I love our flag. I cannot imagine what it means to grow up in a society where you have nothing, you will never have anything, you'll never have freedom, you will never have the freedom of thought or the freedom of speech. Look, when you indoctrinate a population, sure, you're going to get a lot of people to follow your dictates. But you know what? It's a funny thing about the human mind. It wanders. I can't imagine what it's like to be an individual who maybe has family in Miami or maybe somehow illegally accessed the internet, to know that just 90 miles away are a people who live freely, who have the freedom of speech, who have the freedom of thought, who have the freedom of religion, the right to gather where they want, when they want, the right to keep and bear arms. How crazy does that sound? Regular people owning guns? In Cuba, only the state has guns. I cannot imagine. That just sounds, it's a horror to me. It is. It's an absolute horror to me. And I can't imagine what life is like for the average Cuban, but I see a passion on the streets of Havana. People want freedom.
It is a harrowing experience. You described it very well. I remember it very well as a child, knowing that this existed outside the island. It is an island prison. You know, the raw joke is that an adult asking a kid in the streets of Cuba, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the answer is a foreigner. You know, that the Cuban people, after 62 years, deserve better than this. In the world community, we, the United States, we should speak out. Biden should make it very clear that Black Lives Matter and the Squad and the Democratic Socialists of America do not speak for America. You know, we know from the Soviet refuseniks that when Reagan called the Soviet Union an evil empire, that gave them nourishment. We should do that, and we should help with Wi-Fi. If we can help at all through balloons or anything else, through technology, to make sure that the communist thugs in ruling Cuba cannot turn off the internet, that the 11 million people of Cuba can't communicate with each other. If we can help in that manner, that would help greatly. So these two areas, speaking forthrightly, saying no, Black Lives Matter and the Democratic Socialists of America do not speak for the United States, do not speak for the American people, and stopping the government from turning off the internet in any way we can through technology. These are two key things.
All right, I got to leave it there. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. We'll get you back on the program soon.
Thank you.
Well, we did a lot in this episode, not just about Cuba. Yes, Cuba, but about freedom and civil rights and our Constitution and love for our country. I hope this episode made you love the country even more, but I'll close with this. We cannot let this conversation die. We cannot let the media move on to the next topic. We're right. They're wrong. That's the end of the story. The arguments on this television program cannot be broken. Make sure you catch me on SiriusXM Patriot Channel 125, noon to 3 East, 9 to noon West. From Dallas, Texas, I'm Andrew Wilkow. Thank you for watching Blaze TV.